their day-to-day operations to make digitalization easier, more practical, and realistic and affordable, really. So, Sid, next slide, please. So, in order to digitize your day-to-day operations, you actually do it in two key phases. The first one being design experience, and the second one to be building these experiences. Designing basically means planning, mapping out, and understanding really where everything should be so that you can ideate and have an idea of how these experiences will come into fruition once these digital software or once these software has been implemented. And during the building phase, it's when you implement, refine, and see what else can be improved once these softwares or solutions have been put in place. In order to find out, though, how to do this properly, we will be using, I will be introducing a number of frameworks. One of which is one that we use at our company called the Operations Digitization Framework, which actually combines a number of other frameworks in it. As you can see here, the very first one is actually developing a customer persona. I'll be talking more about this later, but basically this means you just identify who you want to sell to or who you want to serve. Afterwards, the second one is mapping out the customer journey. And in this step, we're really um, doing putting everything in paper or somewhere, the step-to-step journey of a customer as they interact with your company or an organization. From there, you kind of list down which areas to prioritize for improvement, which ones have the biggest impact. And on the fourth step, you create a service design blueprint per stage, and you can focus on these set priority areas. Afterwards, the last one is really optimizing the solution, either for automation or really just refining it. And finally, creating a digital solution that will be rolled out in the company or organization. Any questions so far before I move on? If not, let's go on.
All clear, sir.
Okay, great. If not, then let's go on, Sid. So the first part we'll be looking at is um, basically building a customer and company empathy. So for this example, we're looking at, let's see, an e-commerce company called Boxed. Just a bit of a background on the company. They have 10 distribution centers across India. They have 100 uh, employees across both headquarters and the branches. They sell headsets and other consumer electronic products to B2B customers. And so far, growth has stagnated due to the multiple quarantines that has occurred over the past few months. So now, because of that, management has decided to open up a direct ordering via different channels across their website, social media, chat applications to boost incoming inquiries and get potential buyers. And currently, their central warehouse is based in Mumbai. So that's just a bit of a background on the company we're working with now. Now for customer persona development. So before I go here, let me just ask, why do you think it's important to build a customer persona? Uh, yes, that's correct, Aditi. Um, And yes, Yash Meyer, he says, wait, let me just read that chat as well. Basically, knowing their different motivations and purchasing habits. Now, what I want to take out of what everyone shared earlier was really knowing their motivations. Because honestly, whenever I deal with clients or people for that matter, you kind of have to understand that in general, people are a bit selfish. Um, and we're looking at that in a positive way, mainly because you kind of want to understand what they want and what they need on a day-to-day basis. Because if you're talking to them about things that they don't really care about, you're basically talking to someone who won't bother listening to you or your points, whether it be right or wrong. And that's really the importance of a customer persona. So, Sid, next slide, please. So, as Aditi mentioned, it's really finding out who your ideal customers are. By ideal, we understand that each company has a number of different customer personas. But for this exercise, although you can have maybe 3 to 5 different customer personas, we'll just be creating one as an example, and from there, we'll look at how their days are like, what are the everyday challenges that they face, and how they make decisions. Because decision making, as Aditi said, is um, one of the most important factors. People change their mind left and right, um, really based on their mood, and you just kind of want to catch them at the right mood and pitch to them the right idea, just so that, and from there, if you do that successfully, they'll actually be your champion and make sure that they will recommend you to other people. And at the same time, if you fail to do that or fail to provide proper service in the future, the opposite may also happen. So next slide, Sid, please. So we already spoke about why we should create a customer persona. Basically, uh, and we can actually skip this slide, Sid, sorry. Um, what we usually use is this um, empty slide here, which we can easily fill up. So like I mentioned, for today, we'll be making a customer persona for Box. Um, so in this case, just to make things a lot easier for everyone, we already prepared one in advance. So for this one, we have Edith, who's 35 years old. She's female, obviously. She lives in the urban area. She has 15 years of working experience, and she basically handles the purchasing of um, electronic goods for a mid-sized BPO in Manila with a company this is supposed to be India, but anyway, with a company revenue of probably uh what's this 20 CR, is that the correct conversion, said? And in terms of hobby, she enjoys listening to music, sourcing the best deals in the market, whether that be for personal consumption or for the company. And in terms of the devices used, she has an Android phone and a non-Mac laptop. At the same time, in terms of psychographic profile, she's trying to survive yes, and Shui, you have a question?
Sir, what will be the process to collect all these details about a customer? Will there be a
Okay.
survey or anything?
There are multiple ways to actually create a persona or a customer persona. One of which, yes, you can use surveys, especially if you have that data of the demographics of mainly big percentage of your customers. You can get the like majority of your customers. You can even make it a range, let's say from how many percentage of your customers are female, aged between, let's say, 30 to 40 years old, what's their usual educational background, and so on. But as for the others, it's really more on a qualitative approach. Especially, and you get this information from people working on the ground, people who interact with your main customers, just so that you understand what their general background is. And that's how we came up with EDIS generally. So um, when we made Edith's persona, we figured that we tried to kind of visualize who would be the main persona for Box. And since their target is really a B2B companies, most of the clients they work with or the front facing people work with purchasing managers or purchasing heads who have a specific need. And that's pretty much how Edith came into being. We actually, even before creating or giving Edith a name, sometimes you actually give them titles and um, how do you call it? Stereotypes in general, whether it's a baby boomer or a millennial. You can sometimes even call or give the titles of our personas like freshly graduated millennial. And then from there, we actually add in all these details to make it more personal, just so that we can empathize more with Edith. Yes, Bavsar,
Okay, so if I may interrupt,
go ahead.
I just wanted to understand whether Edith is a C2B or a B2B customer.
B2B customer. So,
B2B.
yes, B2B customer.
Okay, so I have the next question in the
Go
sense
ahead.
that how do you get so much details in that you have shown in the profile? Because even a B2B customer, other than the name of the business that the customer has, maybe you might, so you must be using some external sources, maybe the LinkedIn profile or something. So I don't insist that you share that with us, but I was just wondering, because these are the real challenges when you do customer profiling and really have something that is reliable, and that's most critical. If you really want to, handle the customer in the best possible way, you need real, as close to accurate as possible information. How do you get that? Even if I am a B2B with you would only know my name, my company, and maybe a few things from my profiles elsewhere, that may be in the public domain. But even that may give you limited information. I don't know. I mean, everybody may not even be putting up how qualified they are, where they have worked, what is their background, or even their hobbies. I don't think everybody puts it up. So if you could clarify that, it could help all of us plan
Yeah,
better
sure.
for situations like this. Go ahead. Thank you.
So usually to get all these other details, it's really the small talk that we do before and after each meeting that we meet with such customers. So um, more often than not, especially well, pre or post COVID, whenever we meet someone in person or even online, we always make it a point to attend to get to the meeting location early. And it's during that spare time or pre-meeting time that we get to do this small talk with Edith or other people in Edith's team just to ask how they are and get to know them more. And that's when and honestly, no one's really opposed to sharing personal life experience. You just tell them, oh, I have a dog who's doing this. And from there, the conversation spirals and detours to so many different things. And that's how we really get to know our customers even more.
Okay, so you need an intelligent way of getting that information out. But my last point on this issue is, do you have some kind of a regular pattern of meeting customers? Like, since it is B2B, it's still practically possible. So if you say that, yes, we meet, B2B customers once in 6 months or once every quarter, I can still feel that, okay, there is a lot of scope to get the kind of information that you have collected, right? Is there something like that that happens regularly, or what is the average time that or frequency that you actually meet your B2B customer?
Um, Personally, in our company, we actually meet our B2B customers at least once a month.
Oh,
Mainly
that's fine.
because Yeah,
Good, good.
we meet them that often. So from there, um, and for others, we actually meet them once a week. So I guess you can only imagine how much time we have. Like we have at least 10 minutes every week talking about anything under the sun with them.
No, no, please go ahead.
Obviously,
I got the
yeah.
point. Please go. I don't
Okay.
want to interrupt your main talk. If we have
It's
time
okay.
at the end, we'll still elaborate on some of these points.
Sure,
So please
sure,
go
of
ahead.
course.
This is good
So
now.
okay. Sure. Anyway, thanks for asking the question. Feel free to interrupt if you have any other questions. But yeah, so we have this profile of Edith. If you look at the next page, if you look at this page specifically, you can see that in terms of device use, we indicated Android phone and laptop, and even in the next page, yeah, sorry. Even in the next page, we also have the buying behavior and most importantly, technological expertise because from the get-go, we were talking about selling to Edith through online channels. So in this scenario, it's really important to look at their comfortability or um, their know-how or how literate they are in terms of technology. But for in other cases, when building a persona, this may or may not be that important. Yes, you have a question, Bavzar?
Yeah, sorry. Just one small point because it is related to this profile issue. You mentioned non-Mac.
Yes.
So is there any emphasis on, why do you look at customer or your customers who use a Mac and don't use a Mac? I mean, is there any serious finding you have, come across that, okay, it is like this, then it should add like this value to the profile or whatever. I mean, I couldn't understand the connection between
Oh,
a
okay.
Mac user and a non-Mac user.
So, although it might not be that valuable in this scenario, but in more cases, most of the cases, when most of a number of our customers actually choose to interact with us through mobile apps. Now, in this scenario, we're not really building a mobile app but for a number of our customers, they actually request either the application to be available on both iOS and Android. And sometimes we have to prioritize which one of the two is used more, whether it's the Android or iOS. Mainly because in terms of development, you don't build both at the same time. You have a separate team of developers, unless it's I forgot the term where you're building both at the same time. But I hope
Okay.
that answers your question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. But yeah, basically this is the customer persona. I just like to focus on how price sensitive Edith is, especially when it comes to credit terms. Aside from that, she's also very much into trends, so she has some bias towards brands that are popular. Um, Now, in terms of, so that's a persona. Now, the next step in the framework is actually building a customer journey map. Now, what is a customer journey map? Basically, like I said earlier, it's a visual representation of every experience your customers have with you. So you're looking at from the moment they learn about you, their first interaction, um, and so on until they actually buy something from you. And after they buy something from you, they're, excuse me, your post sales service. And obviously, why we should make a customer journey map, aside from what the points I touched on earlier, which was empathy, you also want to look at how you interact with your customers at different stages of the funnel. So at each stage, you usually have a different set of actions. Obviously, at awareness stage, you really just want them to become aware of you. You're educating them of your product and so on. But once they actually become interested in buying your product, then it becomes a question of product details, whether, let's say, your electronics brand has, or your headsets are more durable, the quality of the sound, the mic, its compatibility with different software, and so on. All the way until the buying stage where you're giving them the price, the payment terms, and so on. You're looking at each and every stage of your journey map so that moving forward, once you analyze it, you can understand which areas can be improved upon easily and which ones you can't really do anything on. Um, and so on. So for the customer journey map, if you go to the next stage, Sid, there are a number of templates, just like how we showed you the persona template. You can find these online. This is the one we're using for today's example, where you're looking at their goal at each stage, actions, the technologies used, how long it takes, and whether or not they had a positive or negative experience. Next, please. So um, let's look at Edith's journey with Boxed and the different her experiences at different parts. Um, so awareness and evaluation. Basically, Edith needs 100 headsets for the BPO company. Obviously, headsets don't really last that long if you're using them on a day-to-day basis. So this will be a repeat buy, and she's looking for a long-term contract with a distributor or a retailer. So she starts looking for options of popular headset brands at the best prices available. Upon with her search, she learns of Box. Um, Basically, from asking around, looking at various websites, googling, and so on. So one of the many companies she sends an inquiry to is Boxed, and so she drops them an inquiry at the contact page, and 3 days later, an account manager from Box reaches out to Edith to better understand her requirements. Um, and it's here where they do a preliminary negotiation over the price of bulk purchase. The account manager suggests that they will need an approval from the manager based on the price suggested by Edith. So um, that initial negotiation was a success. So the account man, yes, sorry, okay, never mind. Sorry about that. So where was I? The preliminary negotiation was a success. Now they have to go through an onboarding process for Edith and her company. So the account manager sends an initial list of documents to onboard them as a customer, and it takes a couple of days to for Edith to send the documents. Next slide, please, Sid. So afterwards, once the onboarding is complete, Edith just does a final check on the terms of the contract. And once that's done, she starts to put her first order in the store. So uh, purchase. Next slide, please, Sid. Next one, please. There. So Edith puts her first purchase on Box, filling up the relevant details, and waits for a couple of days to receive the order. And once she receives that, she files the said order with the internal accounting team for records purchases, and so that they're ready with the funds as well. Um, Afterwards, she gets a next slide. She gets a notification when the order is dispatched from the warehouse, and also receives another one once the goods are received by the receptionist. Her team checks for the quality of the headsets, and distributes it. Now, initial customer pain points for the purchasing stage is one. Obviously, there's a long response time from Edith's side. Um, if you think about it, it took them 3 days to reply. By that time, Edith could have probably gotten a number of responses or proposals already from competitors. Second, it's an unclear process and pretty long. It was a drawn out process. There were a lot of back and forths between Edith and the account manager in terms of the negotiation, the documents, and the credit terms. All of those could have been sent in one go. And finally, there was a number of manual tracking of the invoices and encoding done, wasting a lot of Edith's time. Um, for post-purchase though, let's look at what happened after Edith purchased the headsets. So they noticed that a number of the few headsets were damaged, and Edith reached out to the account manager, who ended up redirecting her to the customer service team. She raised the same concerns with the customer service team and uh, was told that it would require an approval from the manager before responding to Edith's request. So a few was accepted and they gave her credit for her next purchase. The problem though was that it took a week before it got approved and Edith had to follow up multiple times, leading to a terrible customer experience. At the same time, about 30 days after, the account manager reached out to Edith indicating that she has an outstanding amount due. And from Edith's side, she wasn't able to stay on top of it, mainly because of the amount of work that she had to do to process a lot, and a lot of the complaints that she got from the defective headsets. So after that reminder, she follows up with accounting and completes the payment and transaction. Um, at the same time, for post-purchase pain points, there was a lot of um, clarity or lack of clarity in terms of the return process. And like I mentioned multiple times earlier, there was a long waiting time needed, as it still needed manager's approval, even though it was clear that Box had an issue with a number of their um, one number of the products sold. So to sum up everything for this customer journey, basically Edith had a terrible customer experience and vows never to buy from them again. And even worse for Box, she also advised her colleagues from the industry that Box isn't really that great in terms of customer service and to not do business with them as well. Um, as I mentioned earlier, there is this template that you can get online and fill up, so you can see the different parts of the customer journey. And the next slide will really be focusing on major areas that can be improved. Although the KYC and account onboarding was a bit seamless, as I mentioned earlier, there are parts that can be improved. But if you noticed from the story that was told, Edith really had a terrible experience towards the purchase and post-purchase area. So in terms of areas for improvement, that's what we'll be focusing on. And that's really how you prioritize which areas you want to focus on in terms of adding technology and which ones have the greatest impact. Normally, we have this other framework called the ICE bucket, and maybe Sid can talk about that next time. But focusing more on the different stages that can be improved. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a purchase stage. So in this area, you're looking at getting orders, managing those orders, relaying information like what was mentioned earlier, and keeping customers updated about their order delivery time and when they should expect it. Now, as you may have heard from the earlier story, there is a lot of paperwork involved. It's a long, drawn out process. In terms of checking inventory, it's currently done manually, and this is done every time there is a new order. So there is a lot of manual work done. As for the post purchase stage, um, over here, the key activities are managing the returns, awarding credits, and really ensuring that feel that they are taken care of. Because it is at this stage, really, when there is a return that customers feel the most frustration. And that's why you really have to be mindful and extra sensitive when you're talking to your customers. So, what makes this problematic though is that um, maybe there are a lot of issues with the product, and that can be very draining for the customer success team. On the other side, though, for the customer, having to wait 1 week before finding out whether or not they'll be given credit um, is very stressful on their part because they're already frustrated and you're basically telling them to wait. We're waiting for approval for over a week. And if this occurs with, uh, from the looks of it, 5 to 10% of the orders, set procedures can be put in place so that if there's a minimum or maximum, or if there's already um, like unquestionable proof that the orders are really defective, you can automatically give them a said credit. Um, the next stage, which I will sort of rush through because we don't have much time, is really looking um, or really examining the process and finding ways you can find efficiency in it. Usually, we use a service blueprint for this. Basically, it's a more in-depth customer journey map where you're looking at the different interactions at each stage of the customer journey, and even looking at what each person, both what each stakeholder, the customer, the website, technology used, account managers, and really everyone who's part of that journey and that step does, and how they interact, just so that you can see different bottlenecks and pain points and so on. And afterwards, you're looking for opportunities to improve the process, really. So it's really useful when you're coordinating across multiple departments for complex processes. um, it's really important to build a service blueprint to better understand, and just so that everyone is on the same page, because more often than not, these departments are very siloed, or even they can be self-centered on what they have to do, and they don't really care much on what the others are doing. And that's something that is present across many of the companies and industries I've dealt with. And what I usually tell them, or what we usually present them with, is actually this figure that Sid's sharing right now, where usually a company works just like a musical or a stage play, where both the front stage and the backstage really has to be coordinated. Because just imagine how awkward it would be if the lights turn on a bit late or a bit early, or the song or the instrumentals and the actors are not in sync. It's those pieces of awkwardness that leads to frustrations with the audience, aka your customer. And that's really why you have to make sure that everything is properly integrated, fine tuned, and coordinated. So this is just a sample service blueprint of a specific part of the customer journey. So uh, well, this is the example of the service design blueprint, and it's many different elements. Like I mentioned, you're looking at a specific action in the customer journey, and then you're dividing it between the front stage and backstage, basically what your account managers are, or basically what your customers can see, whether it's the account managers, your website, and so on. And the backstage, basically your legal team, and your warehousing team, just to make sure that everything's coordinated. Here's a sample of it being filled up already. So over here, we're looking at the purchase stage, and I won't go into detail on it anymore, but like I mentioned, in terms of this stage, there are a lot of manual processes that are time consuming, and the fact that it's manual means that it's prone to errors. And as Aditi mentioned earlier, usually there are systems in place such as a CRM. The problem is that not everyone has access to such systems. So more often than not, unless it's really put into practice, the data and the systems are not really updated real time. And other times there are staff shortages, which push up the processing time, and it might not be that scalable. And each of these key issues, if you notice, is an opportunity for technology to play a role, or not even technology, it can even be just um, optimizing your process just to address some of these issues. So um, I'm a bit short on time, so I'll just give some examples for each. Um, being prone to errors, if you are able to standardize forms or even digitize it so that you don't even have to encode it anymore, that can solve a lot of issues already. We initially spoke about automation at the latter part of the journey, and this can also minimize the amount of manual effort done, and that can also resolve parts of the staff shortages. Um, at the same time, such automation can make things a lot easier so that the data in the system is up to date in terms of current inventory and so on. And this will also make it a lot more scalable. So over here, if we're looking at an optimized flow of the service design blueprint, if you're putting it all on digital already, you can actually make it so that the customer can already see what's available in the website. So a lot of e-commerce websites sort of claim this, but if you look into the finer details, if you get the chance, you'll see that most companies that deal with such websites, especially like Shopify or third party or marketplaces, they're required to put a certain amount of inventory, and it's hard to manage. At the same time, in terms of tracking orders, you can easily add geolocations. You can easily send notifications or emails or SMS or even chat messages to your customers about their order updates. At the same time, there are a lot of barcode scanners, QR scanners now that sells for cheap on to make it easier for your warehouse staff to input which orders are being shipped. Next slide, please. All the way until the delivery staff being able to pass it on to the dispatch, and the last stage, basically updating your inventory and notifying your customer once the delivery is done. So if you look here, at the next two slides, you can see a sample of the manual and optimized slide, and you can see how much cleaner it is in a way. Is it there, Sid? So this is the manual slide, and I think Sid can share these slides with you afterwards anyway, right, Sid? Just so that you can look at them or give more time to analyze it as well later on. So if you look here at the next slide for the optimized slide, you can see that the number of touch points are a lot less, as well as the number of actions that need to be done. And this actually translates to a lot of time saved, both for the company and for your customer. And believe believe me, this actually produces a better experience for them, and it makes them much happier. Um, so before I end this presentation, I just kind of want to mention some key considerations. Um, Basically, in this scenario, for Boxed, I guess, their key consideration is really minimizing the inefficiencies, making sure that their new system integrates with any of their existing systems, and finally, it optimizes the order taking process, and basically provides a better customer experience. Now, these key considerations are specific to this example, and for each and every scenario, there will be different key considerations. Um, the point here is basically understanding what your company or your future company's key consideration will be, and trying to really find the best solution that fits your requirement or your pain points. I think that's a main idea you want to consider when talking about digitizing your operations. It's really understanding both the company and the customer and finding a way to make everything work, both internally for coordination and providing quality service. So I guess we have a few more minutes for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions?
Guys, one more thing before we actually end. Thank you so much, Jello, for
No worries.
for the entire flow. You remember in one of our classes we discussed strategic trade-offs and different operations, different companies having to make trade-offs because of different limitations that they have. One important point that I think that should come out of this entire exercise on how companies can go about digitalizing various parts of their operations is the fact that the strategic trade-offs which organizations often make can actually be reduced significantly if we are using digital technologies. And just blanket application of any technology, applying any kind of buzzwords, someone mentioned AI or chatbots or whatever it is, I don't think that really is solving any purpose. It really has to be specific to that particular customer persona which the organization is looking to serve. You can have multiple customer personas which your organization is serving, and that's absolutely fine. And you can choose to basically have your own kind of strategic focus in terms of improving some of those operational matrices as such. So with this, I think thank you so much, Akshay or Anish. Is there anything else you might want to add?
No, sir. All good from my side.
Siddharth, if I may just add one small point. Is Jello still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
So, see, maybe this is just a case, but I'm just taking it as a real incident. I think I'm doing this for the benefit of the students. That we are not focusing on the fact that the product was defective. We had everything to do with the software, all the steps involved. But assuming that this is a first-time customer, and see, the whole experience for the customer with regard to getting the order processed is a few weeks, okay, and then maybe another 2 weeks or so to get back the refund or credit. But the use of the product is going to be over months or maybe a couple of years, okay. So every time the customer is using, and if really the product quality is bad, my point is all of this software-based effort will not give you the kind of returns which you can get if you don't address the product problem, which we have not discussed in this discussion. That's why I'm just pointing it out. Okay. Otherwise, everything is fine. But Jello might be able to answer, or Siddharth, you might be able to answer. Especially this is for the students. That should we, if you are giving this as an example, then the defect aspect should also be somewhere factored, or your example may need to be modified so that somebody doesn't go in that line, doesn't start worrying about that factor. Am I
Yes,
stretching the
you're
point?
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So whether or not, well, actually, in this case, we did mention that the 5 to 10% of products are defective, and that may actually be another point to look at as well. It's just that in this scenario, we focused on the customer relationship or how they dealt with the customer complaining. But really, the no product is perfect. That's actually one of the main reasons why we included that in the example. Even on a day-to-day basis, there are a lot of, let's say in software, there are a lot of bugs, and that's something you have to deal with as well. And there are a lot of internal processes that can be put in place as well, just to minimize that. And that can be a topic for another session if ever, right, Sid?
Sure. Thank you. I just wanted to add that you can just put this as one more point in your explanation that, okay, we are not looking at the defective product, which itself could be another problem that needs to be addressed in a different way.
Right, sir.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
All right. Guess if there are no other questions, we can call it an evening. Thank you so much for attending. I will be sharing the presentations for the reference of everyone. Please feel free to use these templates